Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
It's easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of the fitness industry with its endless stream of new trends and miracle solutions. But what if the key to unlocking true longevity and vibrant health lies in a surprisingly simple set of fundamental practices? That's the powerful message that Juliet Starrett brings to this week's episode of Ageless Athlete. Friends, welcome back to Ageless Athlete, where we unlock the stories and secrets of lifelong performance. And I am really excited to jump into today's chat. I was at the fantastic Outside Festival in Denver last month, and I happened to hear Juliet speak, and she wowed me and inspired me, as well as everybody else, with some of these basics of fitness, of longevity, and how one can incorporate these practices in a day-to-day life. So she was kind enough to accept my invite to come on the show, and I'm thrilled to have her on the podcast today. Juliet isn't just an entrepreneur and fitness advocate. She's a woman who's lived a life of adventure, pushing her limits as a world champion whitewater rafter. But her journey wasn't just about conquering rivers. It was about learning how to build resilience both in her body and her spirit. She's taken those lessons from the heart of extreme adventure and channeled them into creating a movement based philosophy that empowers everyone to move better, age well, and live with greater purpose. Juliet's base camp philosophy is a refreshing antidote to the often overwhelming world of fitness. She emphasizes the importance of acclimating to the basics: sleep, strength training, mobility, and mindful movement before chasing the latest trends or fads. She'll explain why these foundation practices are essential for building a durable, ageless body capable of handling all kinds of adventures and, of course, the inevitable challenges that aging brings. Juliet shares practical tips for incorporating these principles into your daily routine, whether you are an adventure athlete, you're a climber, a surfer, a runner, or you're just a busy professional, simply somebody who wants to feel better in their own skin. We will discover how to embrace these fundamental, unsexy, yet crucial aspects of longevity that often get overlooked. Prepare to be inspired and equipped with a powerful toolkit for lifelong wellness as Juliet shares her wisdom, passion, and journey to building a body that can conquer any adventure at any age. Let's roll. Juliet, great to have you on Ageless Athlete. Please tell us, where are you and what did you have for breakfast this morning?
This morning for breakfast, I had some coffee, which is my lifeblood. I love coffee, and a little bit of oatmeal mixed with some protein powder and some blueberries and raspberries.
Amazing. Sounds like a very wholesome start to the day. So now, hang on. So you're traveling, you're in a new place. Are you carrying your nutrient kit with you so you can stay consistent with your
So
nutrition?
I do. It kind of, I'm lucky on this trip to be, we're road tripping, so we have our car. So people would laugh if we drove our truck down here, and people would laugh if they saw the back of our truck, because we really take full advantage of having a lot of space when we travel in our car. And we do bring a lot of stuff. So I almost always travel with a couple key things from a supplement standpoint, and I can talk more about that later, but I always make sure I have some kind of protein with me. And, we're lucky enough to be staying in an Airbnb. So we have a kitchen, we can buy food, we can sort of have a normal food situation. But regardless of whether I'm plane traveling or normal traveling, I always bring some kind of protein. I bring creatine with me. Because we are road tripping and we are giant nerds, Kelly and I each brought a sandbag and a kettlebell in the back of our truck, because you just never know when you're going to have a chance to do something. So we have a sandbag and a kettlebell, and each in the back of our car, we brought a Frisbee, because one of the things that we're huge fans of and think have been lost in this fitness industrial complex is the art of play. So we always try to create opportunities to play more. And just having a Frisbee on hand is like one of the best ways we've known to do that, because you can play Frisbee anywhere. And then, I do take magnesium before I go to bed, so I bring that. But my sort of die on the vine things are bringing some protein and some implements to exercise with, if I can.
I love that. I have been known to bust out my resistance bands at airport hallways and corners, trying to make sure I get my mobility in. And absolutely being able to have some reliance on reliance, and also reassurance that one can get foods that one's body needs, with all the vagaries that travel brings, is so important for both for body and for perhaps peace of mind.
You're so right. And, I forgot to add, I have to add a couple other things. I do always bring some kind of mobility tool, like a ball. We make a product called a Supernova, but if I don't have room for a Supernova, I bring a lacrosse ball. So I always bring some kind of mobility thing, because again, you never know. One of the things that has really changed though in travel, because I do a lot of plane travel, is it is possible these days to get decent food in an airport. If you try. And I think that that's sort of a changed universe. I mean, obviously it depends airport to airport, but, my go-to often at the airport is to get like a couple of hard-boiled eggs and a coffee and a banana and an apple and an orange. If you stopped me in any airport and had me open my backpack, you'd find like a mobility tool, a banana, an apple, an orange, some kind of protein powder, and like a couple eggs. So I think it's getting a lot easier these days. There's always an option. In fact, I started making a while ago, I make a couple of them a year, but I call them Juliet's gas station lunch. Because I've figured out, gas stations have also improved, convenience stores at gas stations. I mean, my kind of go-to at gas stations is, you can get these little bags now of pickles, hard-boiled eggs, there's cheese. The type of protein bar has improved, so you can get protein bar beef jerky. So, I do these little Instagram posts whenever I'm on a road trip called Juliet's Gas Station Lunch, because I figured out a way to get a pretty decent gas station lunch. And believe it or not, most gas stations actually somewhere in a corner have like a bowl of fresh fruit, and it's not going to be the greatest fresh fruit you ever had. It's not like from the farmer's market in Marin County where it's like perfect, but like it does exist out there. So I figured out these little ways to sort of make sure I get enough protein and fruits and vegetables as I'm on the road, wherever I am.
I love it. I love it. One just has to stay away from those gallon containers of soda for 99 cents. And if you look beyond that, there are options now available that were not that was simply not present.
No.
Or even maybe a few years ago. Juliet, we're racing ahead here. There's so many things that you brought up that I want to dive into. But before we do that, please tell us who you are and what do you do?
Sure. My title is I'm the CEO of the Ready State. And for people who haven't heard of it, we are a digital musculoskeletal care and movement company. And like you, we also have a podcast, and we've written quite a few books. Our most recent book is called Built to Move. We've spent most of our career trying to help the best athletes get better. So we've worked with professional teams of all stripes, Olympians. We've worked a lot in the military and other professional organizations, just trying to figure out, what small little, levers we can pull to help athletes and teams get better. But as Kelly and I have gotten older, and it sounds like we share this in common, our interests have changed a little bit. We still do work with the best athletes and teams, and that still excites us. But we're also really interested in trying to figure out how we can take those lessons that we've learned in the high performance world and sort of transmute them to the rest of us. Because we're both, I turned 51 this year, Kelly turned 50. We are starting to sort of stare into older age and realize that we really want to have a body that can be able to do the things we love to do. And we realize that a lot of the things that we work with our professional athletes at sort of optimizing are also the same things that the rest of us can do to keep our bodies feeling good and healthy and able to do the things we love to do and sort of like have a plan of staying out of the nursing home, so to speak. So our book Built to Move was really our sort of effort to say, hey, these are the lessons we've learned. These are the basic things that we think all humans should be able to do and should be doing and keep an eye on if they want to feel good in their bodies. So that's been our latest mission.
I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24/7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one size fits all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode. Your mission is inspiring, and the ability to take all those hard won strategies that elites have benefited from and have them now be available to the everyday person, the everyday athlete is, can be transformational. Juliet, you didn't just end up here, with this role and this mission. The little that I know about you, amongst your many accomplishments, you were whitewater rafting at the highest level, right? So this is particularly interesting to me. Like I shared, my podcast goes out to adventure athletes and use their stories to inspire everybody else. Would love to know a bit about your origins. Were you always an athlete? Were you always a gifted outdoor person? How did you get into your sport?
Sure. And thanks for asking that. I mean, to the extent that your listeners are outdoors people, like you are my people, because that's how I sort of think of myself as an outdoors person. Like I almost think of myself more as an outdoors person than an athlete. I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. My parents were outdoors people. So I was lucky enough to, have a childhood that was filled with camping and backpacking and river trips and skiing, fishing, you name it. My dad in particular was very outdoorsy. So we just, that's what we did. We also didn't have a lot of money. And so that's what was available to us for, family vacations was going camping. So that's what we did. And so I really fell in love as a little kid with like the pace and the smells and sounds and like exhilaration that comes with being outdoors. I loved that. Like I really fell in love with it. It's interesting. My older brother didn't fall in love with it. We have the same parents. He's like this urban guy who lives in Los Angeles and like, could care less about doing outdoor activities. So for whatever it's worth, it didn't land for him, but it landed for me as a kid. And I loved how it helped me connect and be around people. And, obviously this was because of my age, this was pre-technology, but I loved doing everything outdoors. Like that's what I related to. I will say, I don't think I'm a gifted athlete at all. I definitely played all sorts of sports as a kid. And then in high school, I moved to Southern California for the last 2.5 years of high school. And I discovered the sport of rowing. And so I rowed in high school, and then I was a Division I rower at UC Berkeley. And I have tons to say about that in terms of the era and all of the mistakes we made and how much of a better athlete I could have been knowing what I know now. But that's maybe a separate conversation we can talk about later. But I then was seeking a summer job as an 18-year-old. You may have heard me mention this at the Outside Festival, but I had a couple of goals in mind. One of them is I wanted a job where I could be outside. The second was I wanted to be tan. And the third was I wanted to be around some like cute boys. That was my 18-year-old brain at work, right? So I'm a Division I rower, and I decided to go to whitewater rafting guide school over my spring break, my freshman year of college. So that began my career as a river guide, and I was lucky enough to work. I actually guided almost 10 seasons. I worked rivers all over California, Oregon. I did a couple Grand Canyon trips. But what happened is after I graduated from college, I became aware of this weird extremely fringe sport called extreme whitewater paddling, which is done in a raft, not in a kayak. And what's interesting about the sport that I learned is that in the US, it's like really, really fringe. Like most people have never heard of it. They think of rafting as like a recreational thing they do. They do not think of it as a competitive sport. But it turns out in a lot of countries, it's a serious competitive sport. A lot of Eastern European countries, quite a few Asian countries, Australia, New Zealand, these are teams that are like funded by their government. It's serious. There's been talk of making this an exhibition sport in the Olympics. But when I was doing it, it was like a fringe sport nobody had ever heard of. But it did perfectly marry my background as a rower, my ability to, pull hard on a thing and be able to suffer, and my experience working as a guide, being able to read and run rivers. So I made the national whitewater team in 1997, and 6 months later, we were competing in our first world championship on the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe, which we won. And it just served so many purposes for me. I mean, I loved being an athlete. I loved having the opportunity because we competed in races in, Argentina, Costa Rica, Chile, twice in Africa, all over the US. And so I think it really served this like purpose of being able to travel all over the world as a young person, sort of combine these like weird athletic skills I have. And the reason I say I don't think I'm a great athlete is that I don't actually think I'm a very skilled athlete. Like, I don't know that I would have been the best like team sport, ball sport athlete, but what I'm really good at is suffering, which is a great quality to have in rowing. And I'm coachable. I'm coachable. So I think I was able to take those two things and, bring them together to, go compete on these crazy rivers. And what's crazy about this sport is that, they would host all our world championship events on the biggest class 5 whitewater rivers on earth, the Zambezi, the Fu, a river that's now underwater called the Reventazon in Costa Rica. And part of their goal was to make these races good television. And they're good television when they're on these crazy rivers where we're all flipping rafts and having carnage everywhere. And so it was really, it was really full on, I mean, it's really, to go from a sport like rowing, which is very controlled, and to then go to a sport that, you're out in nature. The river is different levels every day. You can scout and plan, but there's only so much planning. You might have a surge in a rapid that flips your raft, where you're, it's really often you're going through rapids where if you swim or have a bad situation, you could die. It was a wild experience, but man, it was so fun. And I'm still connected to my teammates to this day. And, it was a great 5-year period in my life being a professional athlete.
What a great story there. One thing we immediately have in common, I also I got the bug for the outdoors because my family, we would go backpacking in the Himalayas when I was a kid. And those were transformational experiences. I think I hated that as a child. I would rather be at the beach with the other kids or at my grandparents' house rather than picking bugs out of my soup at night. and then like you, I was also not very gifted, but I think just the sheer dint of the love for adventure and for being outside and for being able to recreate in these beautiful places. I mean, some of those places that you've been to seem incredible.
Can I just say a second, I have to interrupt you to say, like, what a flex that is to say that, like, you grew up backpacking in the Himalayas as a child. Like, that is such a flex. It's so awesome. It's like an American. You're like, oh yeah, I was in the Rocky Mountains, but you're like, I was in the Himalaya. It's pretty amazing.
Well, when I was a kid, part of my drive to maybe travel and move to the US as an adult was that thirst for adventure. And for me, maybe what seems striking to you was what seemed striking to me when I would hear of people in the West, people like yourself, and you would go skiing or climbing or rafting, or over the Rockies or whatnot. I mean, I would feel that same sense of exotic delight.
Yes, I feel you.
So it's amazing. It's amazing, yeah. And I also think that you brought this talent for, or maybe this background in rowing. And this friend of mine, Skylar, who's also got a rowing background, and he's one of the most, he's one of the fittest people I know. He can just pick up any sport, and I think he credits his background and the discipline he got from rowing. You took that background and the discipline and the athleticism, you combine that with perhaps your love for adventure. And it sounds like there was a balance of like both, love for the sport, love for travel, and also maybe some astute thinking on picking the right sport where you could bring your strengths to bear and take that forward at the highest level.
You're right. I do some consulting and talk with a lot of entrepreneurs about how to be an entrepreneur. And one of the things that I think is the most important quality of entrepreneurship is self-awareness. And I think that's true. I think one of the reasons I've been successful as an entrepreneur is self-awareness. I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And I think that same sense is exactly what you're picking up on, right? Like I sort of knew where I could be successful as an athlete and where I couldn't. And so I gravitated towards doing things where I knew I could be successful. And, just a quick comment on the discipline thing. I mean, man, I had I had a reunion with some of my Cal rowing friends maybe 10 years ago. And I was blown away by how successful this group of women were. I mean, I'm telling you, there was not like a slouch in the group. Like everyone had like 3 PhDs and were physicians and are CEOs of companies. And I actually wondered to myself afterwards, like, are there people who are sort of disciplined and ambitious, drawn to rowing? Or is it the discipline created by being a rower that launches that group into high achieving positions? I don't know. I didn't come up with an answer to that. But I just had to, double click on your comment about the discipline piece because I think I don't know. I haven't figured out the answer to that question. I don't know whether you gravitate towards it because, you're an achiever or whether you become an achiever by doing the sport.
Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing, it's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this. Intriguing question indeed. One immediate thought I have when I think back of some of the people I met who were climbers and whatnot, the ones who kept climbing and kept focus. I mean, that's one set of people, and but then the ones who took again those lessons and applied them in a different field, they also succeeded quite highly. But then there's also that group of people, who were, let's say, more lifestyle climbers and who continued on that path, and maybe they found ways to get paid in some other profession, and they're also cruising in that path as well. So maybe I think it's the level at which you pursue a specific sport, and I think if you bring that kind of ferocity to other disciplines, you will probably succeed. Maybe once that bug bites you, and you and some of the things you said are so important, like you have that self-awareness on the gifts you have and the ones you don't, and the ones you need to be coached with. Fast forwarding a little bit, you, if I understand correctly, you then went on to develop a career as a successful lawyer. But at some point, you, quote unquote, chucked it all to launch this mission in fitness. Any pivotal moments where you realized that as successful as you could have been in the field of law, you were actually going to realize your potential in a greater way with what you're doing today?
Yeah, so I think I'll go back, to tell the story. And you're right, I did. After I got tired of being a dirtbag professional athlete and river guide, I was like, all right, it's time to make some money and, make something of myself, use my Cal undergraduate degree for a purpose. So I decided to go to law school. But, in retrospect, I think law school is the place where, like, people who are good at school and kind of smart but aren't sure what they want to go do often, which may not be the right reason. I've always loved school. Like, I'm a school person, and so I knew that I could do well in law school, and so it just seemed like a natural next step for me. I felt like I sort of took a detour after my undergrad and did this professional athlete thing, which was cool, but I was like, it's time to get serious. But the other motivator for me in going to law school was I grew up with a single mom. And, she was a very highly regarded journalist. She's still alive, but she's retired. Highly regarded journalist in Colorado, and worked for the Denver Post and Boulder Daily Camera. But she was always financially struggling. And so I knew as a young woman that I wanted to pursue a profession where I could be totally financially secure and financially independent. And that was really important to me. And so that was the other motivation for pursuing the law school path. And I'll be honest, I don't use my law degree much anymore, but I have no regrets about it. In part because, one of the things that I'm such a fan of in entrepreneur journeys is having a fallback, right? Like, I think it's, people, I'm good at taking risk. I've taken a lot of risk in my life in entrepreneurship and in athletics and otherwise. But I also, I do that in sort of a measured way. And one of the measured ways I did that professionally was I have this law degree fallback. If everything explodes in my entrepreneur journey, I have a fallback, and I like that. So, but at some point, I think I'd been practicing law for like somewhere between 3 and 5 years. I don't remember the timeline, But I was starting to look forward and think, okay, what is my career in this profession going to look like? The first 3 years of law practice, you're just like, like barely keeping your head above water, trying to learn the profession and understand what's going on. And sort of my head got above water. I had my sea legs, so to speak. And I was like, what does this mean for me? What does my life look like? And I looked ahead and I didn't really see any women in particular in my profession whose lives I wanted to have. I respected them immensely intellectually and professionally, but I sort of looked at like the big picture of their life and I was like, is that the life I want? Is that the life that's going to allow me to do the adventures that I love and be a super participant in my kid's life? Is it lighting me up? Because I'll say that I was good at being a lawyer. That wasn't the problem. I was good at it. But it didn't light me up in some important way. At the same time, my husband and I had started a CrossFit gym. We started the 20th CrossFit in San Francisco in 2005. So I was both working as a lawyer and, running a CrossFit gym on the side. And I just started thinking, I don't see myself in the future here. I don't see someone whose life I want to emulate. I am obsessed with all, I spend my free time reading all things health, wellness, fitness. I was reading like strength and conditioning books and nutrition books in my spare time while I was working as a lawyer. And I had this opportunity to just go see what I could do. And so even though our gym was literally in a parking lot in the Presidio of San Francisco, and obviously my lawyer friends thought I was truly insane that I would leave a very well-paying law job, well on my way to becoming a partner, to go run a gym in a parking lot seemed crazy to people. Had this strong sense that I had to go see. I just had to go see. And I don't know if that's my background being an adventure person, but I was like, I just have to go see. And again, it was a pretty safe risk because, I could go see for 3 or 4 years and then go back and be a lawyer if it didn't work out. So I just, jumped feet first into figuring out how to, because at the time I left my law career, our gym was very small. It was still a time when nobody had heard of CrossFit. People take for granted, there was Gmail didn't exist. I'm just trying to give people a sense of like how long ago this was in terms of like technology and availability of, tools to run a small business. There weren't any. And it's all in and, started learning how to figure out, learning how to be an entrepreneur and run a business and hire people. And, honestly, I never looked back. Like I in 2 seconds, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like it was that sort of I hate the word passion, so I'm not going to use that. I do not enjoy that word, but it lit me up in a way that is hard to describe, but I felt lit up in a way that I never felt lit up when I was practicing law.
Another great story, and also resonates as I start this little venture, with this podcast. And very early in my, let's say, life as a creative, as an entrepreneur, I come from like a tech and let's say tech for nonprofit background. And I have a tiny bit of financial security that allows me to also just focus on this and try to make it the best it can be. But I also have the backup. I think I can go back to what I was doing before. Not that I want to. I have, and it's cool. Your story of growing up with your mom and wanting to. I've had a boring, but let's say practical middle class upbringing, where I think it is important for me as well to know that. I can do this and give it everything I have, but then there is some buffer. And I see that with some other outdoor athletes, some climbers and surfers that I know who have been, who are more lifestyle-like. And I just think that it's perhaps a different personality type, and I have full respect for them. But they can go and, do their sport full-time and with full gusto and vigor, but it's just wiring, which is a little bit different that I think we have. So now you have started this new venture, taking CrossFit to the masses. I can only imagine, when CrossFit, and I think CrossFit in many ways uh, was a pioneer in the kind of high intensity group fitness classes that have become so popular, and your efforts and your husband's efforts took it far and beyond. But coming back to the present now, you have taken a lot of your lessons and built this business around what you said earlier, which is taking practices for lifelong, let's say, health and fitness to the masses. Can you talk to us a little bit on how does your approach to, let's say, mobility and fitness differ from traditional strength training, maybe even different than CrossFit, so to speak, with some focus perhaps on aging athletes, if I may?
Sure. I think there's a couple ways I can tackle this, but I think I'll start with the first. My first thought on that question is that I think people might be surprised to learn that the levers that we pull to make some of the best athletes and teams better are not fancy. People think that I think people would think, oh, okay, the Starretts are going to consult with the Warriors and they're going to be working on all this fancy stuff. Well, it turns out that the things that work for the best athletes to make them great are the basics, but they're the basics applied with radical consistency. And we recently had a guy on our podcast named Nick Gill, and he is the longtime strength and conditioning and human performance consultant of a team called the All Blacks. And the All Blacks, for people who aren't familiar with rugby, are the New Zealand national rugby team. They're a storied team. Many books have been written about them, about their culture, about their practices, because they're the winningest team in all sports in history. So I'm not talking just winningest team in rugby, in all sports. So obviously that's piqued people's curiosity and they want to know how they do it. And so I asked Nick Gill on the podcast, this was just about 6 weeks ago. I said, hey, Nick, what is it? What is it that the All Blacks are doing to be the winningest team in history? And he said, we do the basics really well. And I think that would surprise people, because I think what people think these elite teams and athletes are doing are, all the fancy supplements and massages and, ice baths. And I mean, you name it, technology, data. And they are doing those things. Don't get me wrong. They are doing those things and they have access to those things. But at the core, they're doing the basics really well. And that's what is making them high performers. And so I really believe that we, as regular people who are just trying to do our outdoor sports or our recreational sports, whatever those may be, and feel good in our bodies as we age, we need to double down on doing the basics really well. And so that's what I've been interested in lately. I have this, you probably heard me tell this at the outdoor festival, but I have this Everest analogy that I like a lot, because I'm obsessed with Everest, even though I'm a whitewater person. I've never been to Everest or Everest Base Camp. I'm a user. I love all things Everest. I'm fascinated by it. I have massive admiration, maybe because I was a guide myself. I have massive admiration for the guides that risk their lives to take everyday people up to the top of this thing. It sort of has this ethos for me. But the way that I like to explain it is that there's this part of the Everest called the Khumbu Icefall, which is the first part people climb. People have to take these crazy ladders over giant crevasses and climb up these like snow blobs. And the whole thing for the rest of us looks super sketchy. What I see when it comes to taking care of our health is there's a group of people, and everybody listening either is one of these people or knows one of these people. And they're the people that are really enamored with the bells and whistles and fancy stuff, or they're looking for a shortcut. So they're the people like my neighbor, Russell, who literally came up to me recently. Russell runs an advertising agency, and he's a lovely guy. And he's like, hey, I'm thinking about taking this mitochondrial supplement. And I was like, okay, well, what for? And he's like, well, I heard that like mitochondrial health is the key to longevity and feeling good in your body. And I was like, great. Well, that's cool. I know there's a lot of interesting research going on mitochondrial health, and there's definitely some supplementation coming out. Did you sleep last night? And he's like, I slept like 5 hours. And I use that to say that, like, to me, a mitochondrial supplement is cool. That's cool. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening there, but that's a nice to have. Sleep is a must have. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there are these people that are stuck down in Nepal. They're stuck down in Kathmandu. And those people are overwhelmed by what is going on in health, wellness, fitness, longevity. Man, there is a fire hose of information coming out about how people should eat, how they should move, how they should recover, how they should have their relationships. I mean, it's a lot of information. And what I see on the other end of the spectrum is a lot of people are overwhelmed and they have paralysis. They don't know what to do, or they're playing whack-a-mole. They're just trying different things all the time. So what I hope I can do in my own work is bring both the people trying to climb the Khumbu Icefall and the people stuck in Kathmandu to base camp. Because everybody who knows anything about Nepal and climbing Everest is that in order to climb Everest, you need to acclimate at base camp for like 6 weeks. This is like a whole thing. You got to go to Everest base camp. You got to acclimate and do little mini climbs up Everest. So I want to bring all the confused people that are stuck in Kathmandu up to base camp by helping them identify a simple set of behaviors they should apply with radical consistency. And I'm trying to bring those people in the Khumbu Icefall down because they tried to skip acclimation at Everest Base Camp. You can't skip acclimation. And acclimation, when it comes to your wellness and longevity, is the basics. So I'm into it. If you are checking the box on all the basics with radical consistency, and then you want to take a mitochondrial supplement, dude, more power to you. But you can't do all that stuff in lieu of the basics. And I think that's where we've gotten lost. I think we've gotten enamored with the fancy, or we've gotten confused. And my goal is to bring people somewhere in the middle. And to me, that's Everest Base Camp.
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together: training, aging, mindset, and awe, you will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
Juliet, what an evocative analogy. So apt for this podcast. And I love that about bringing people to base camp. That makes so much sense. People are trying to, micro titrate their supplementation and getting down all these rabbit holes in their pursuit for like the latest hacks, if I may. But they are forgetting to focus or to preserve those fundamentals that can allow them to acclimate at base camp, like you so rightly put, which is just such a great segue that I just have to ask you, can you please help walk us down some of these basic tenets, these foundations of your base camp philosophy?
Sure. It's pretty simple. And I'll just do a quick list and then we can talk about them more extensively. You need to sleep 7 or 8 hours a night. There's no scientific dispute about this. Adults need to sleep 7 or 8 hours a night. You've got to eat fruits and vegetables. We can talk about how much I think you should eat, and protein. You need to walk a lot. Human beings are meant to walk and move a lot. We need to get non-exercise activity. You need to be able to get up and down off the ground. You need to have some mobility in your body, especially if you don't want to end up in a nursing home. to me, those are the basic things. One of the things I love to add for an outdoor audience is lift weights. And the reason that I like to add that to an outdoor audience is that I think those of us who are in the outdoor space, we tend to do a good job already of getting the cardiovascular fitness as sort of, the sort of hard cardio that we need in whatever our pursuits are. But we often we don't see ourselves as gym people. So we don't want to go spend the time that you have to spend in the gym to get strong and have a strong skeleton and a strong, sort of armor of muscle on our body that really will help us age. So I think those would be the things. If you, I'm sure many of your listeners also listen to Peter Attia and some of the sort of longevity experts. And, Attia says that, VO2 max is the thing, the most important thing for aging. And, and then if you listen to Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, having skeletal muscle mass is the thing. But to me, exercise is so personal. And it really is, such a part of who we are, and we all have different preferences. And so I don't really care how you get your cardiovascular fitness and work on your VO2 max. And I don't care, what type of weightlifting or strength work you want to do. But I think, man, you've got to eat fruits and vegetables. You've got to sleep. You have to give a crap about your mobility if you don't want to end up in a nursing home. You have to care about that. And you got to walk a lot. We're supposed to walk. I mean, honestly, I believe the prescription for older folks, and I'm talking older, like over 45, is like walk and lift weights. If people just walked enough and lifted weights, like we wouldn't even be having this conversation because we'd all be perfectly healthy.
Those principles make sense. It's, it's funny. They almost seem boring.
They're so boring.
But sometimes
they're not sexy at all. They're not sexy. And I get it. It's so fun. Like, it's so much more fun to be like, I'm getting my red light therapy and I'm sleeping on these magnets. And, it's way more fun to talk about those things at a party. Like, talking about how you got 8 hours of sleep last night is not cool. And it's hard to make a cool, fun reel on Instagram about that. But man, the amount of people, when you really dig deep and ask people what their habits are, and learn that they're not doing these things. They know they should be doing them in many cases, but they're not doing them. And they're definitely not doing them consistently. And, again, lots of fancy stuff you can add to that base level. But, it's almost like, you got to take chemistry 1A before you can take organic chemistry. People are not taking chemistry 1A.
Yeah, people are, using the diet analogy, people are not eating their basic intake of fruits and vegetables before they go into, sophisticated and niche supplementation. So,
yeah. Right. There's no substitute for eating actual food. And there's all these other, and I don't know whether we want to go into the food thing because there's a lot, but there's no substitute for eating actual food. There's no supplement that's going to be better than eating actual food. And there's so many other reasons why eating actual food is good for our brains and bodies, besides just the nutrient piece that we can discuss that, you don't get when you just take a handful of pills.
One thing I loved immediately about, the talk you gave is a lot of your principles and practices seemed immediately realizable by the everyday, let's say, urban, overscheduled person, because you had all these, tips and strategies to be able to weave in these practices on our daily cycle. So let's try to maybe go through a few of them. And I don't have enough time with you. I would like to keep you all day, but that's not possible. The sleep one, I think, again, undersleeping, common epidemic. One question I want to ask you is, in your system, is it possible to make up a few days of less sleep?
So, yeah.
But be able to cover up, maybe by sleeping a bit more, and let's say doing that on a weekly cycle?
That's a complicated question. And if you go hardcore into the sleep research, you learn that, for example, a nap isn't the same as actual sleep, right? So a nap helps. A nap is nice, but you can't nap your way out of poor sleep. You can catch up on sleep though, and it might take a week or 2 weeks. But I think what's essential about my thinking and the way that I like to help people think about this is that I am a user. I am a mom. I travel a lot for work. I'm also going through menopause. So there are 1,000 reasons why my sleep isn't perfect. And I think one of the things that frustrates people is when you hear online, oh, you've got to optimize your sleep. And you're like, okay, well, I can't. So I think people just throw in the towel because they're like, I'm traveling for work. I woke up with my children. I woke up because I'm in menopause. My sleep was interrupted for X, Y, and Z reason. And look, I'm a realist. I get it. There's not always going to be. I just was traveling last week to the East Coast. I had 2 nights where I got 5 hours of sleep because of jet lag and having to get up early for various business things. And I'm not going to feel sad about that. I'm not going to conclude that my efforts at longevity are over. I am just trying to get the best sleep I can when I can. And then when I can, try to catch up on sleep. And when I have, we had a sleep researcher and expert named Dr. Kirk Parsley on our podcast, and he has spent most of his career working with Navy SEALs. And the reason that I find his work so interesting is that, man, Navy SEALs aren't given the opportunity to sleep 8 hours a night, in a perfect environment. I mean, they're thrown in crazy environments all over the world. Their sleep is extremely disrupted. For many years, the strategy in the Navy or in the Navy SEALs in particular was for, those guys to be taking like 3 Ambien a night. And one of the things Dr. Parsley worked out is how to figure out how to support these Navy SEALs without having them be on Ambien all the time, because Ambien is, there's a lot of reasons why Ambien messes up your sleep. It can feel good in the short term, but it ultimately is not. You get poor quality sleep on Ambien. But what Kirk Parsley said that I love is that rest is the next best thing to sleep. So for the busy working professional out there who is jet lagged, traveling, kids, menopause, whatever, the goal is my goal and suggestion per Dr. Kirk Parsley is to lay in bed for 8 or 9 hours a night. Lay in bed, because rest is the next best thing to sleep. And if you have a period of time, like I, for some reason, am going through a phase where I wake up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's super annoying. But I don't get out of bed, and I don't read a book, and I don't turn the lights on, and I don't watch TV, which is the traditional advice. I just lay there and I have a little breathing practice. I try to meditate, and I don't stress about it anymore, because I know that I just tell myself, like almost a mantra, like sleep is the next best thing to rest. I'm going to wake up and feel functional. I can always catch up on sleep in the next couple of nights. But, my goal is to try to have people understand that how essential sleep is. It is essential. 7 of the 15 leading causes of death are linked to not enough sleep, and not enough sleep is less than 7 hours. So, the data is there, but also we're living real lives that have impacts. And I think if we rethink sleep and think we've got to aim to be in bed for 8 or 9 hours whenever we can, that you can catch up on sleep over time when you're in a sleep deficit. Naps aren't better than sleep, but they're better than no nap. And that rest is the next best thing to sleep. I think with those principles in mind, I think we can live in this modern world and be, busy people that have demands, not always sleep perfectly, and still get the best sleep we can, the most number of nights we can.
Solid principles again. And what I'm hearing from you is, some of those unfortunate nights when I wake up at 4 a.m. myself and can't fall back to sleep, I should probably not start doom scrolling the New York Times and get further agitated.
Yes.
I should try to continue attempting to keep sleeping. Do you use? Okay, I had this question about trackers. I am a bit of a Luddite, so I hate wearing things on my body, and I don't track my sleep. I don't track other data. Do you think using a tracker is significantly more effective and telling us how rested we are, how well we slept, et cetera, than just waking up in the
And
morning or
assessing how we feel,
yeah,
right? Yeah, I mean,
yeah, or maybe going out for a big, let's say, a big physical push,
yeah.
and letting our whoop tell us, hey, you are tracking here with all your basics. So please tell me, where do you stand on this
Okay,
one?
so I am a nerd and I love data and I love a tracker. Like I'm wearing an Aura ring right now and I have a Garmin. So I've got a couple tracking things going on. But I have a lot to say on this. The most important things I've learned about tracking my sleep for almost 10 years now are number one is that we lose up to 30 minutes to an hour of sleep per night, much of which we're unaware of, but also doing things like getting up to use the bathroom. And let me explain what I mean by this is that on an average night, let's say I got in bed at 10 and I woke up at 6, I actually will only get 7 hours and 15 minutes of sleep. I think that was the biggest key learning I got from tracking my sleep, which nobody listening to this needs to track their sleep to know this. The only action item from that is that if you want to get 8 hours of sleep, you need to be laying in bed for 8.5 to 9 hours of sleep. If you want to meet the minimum of 7 hours of sleep, you need to be laying in bed for at least 7.5 hours to 8 hours. So that's why one of the recommendations I make is lay in bed for 7.5 to 8.5 hours or 8 to 9 hours. Because you're naturally, this is a normal part of the sleep cycle. You're going to lose some sleep. So I think that was the first thing I learned from tracking, which you don't need to track to know because I've just told you. And then I think the second biggest thing we've learned that has changed people's behavior from tracking is alcohol use. We had Dr. Kristen Holmes on our podcast. She is with Whoop, and they're getting amazing amounts of and massive amounts of data from people. And she said the biggest behavior and lifestyle change they've seen from people tracking their sleep over the years is alcohol cessation or minimization, because people really see when they track their sleep, it is like a 1-to-1. Like you have a couple drinks and your sleep score is total crap the next day. And it's universal, right? Like it happens to everybody. And so I think that's been a really interesting learning that we've gotten from sleep, is that alcohol messes up your sleep and that you need to lay in bed for longer than you want to sleep. I think those are the two big things. Turns out what people are not doing is changing their training schedule based on their recovery score. So I've been tracking my sleep for all these years. I wake up, and if I'm in the red on a Whoop, or if I get a poor recovery score on my Aura ring or whatever, metric they're using, I mean, I don't change what I'm planning to do. I'm going to the gym at 7:30 today. Like I may be in the red, and it turns out that's what the data that, Whoop and the other data collectors are getting, is that it's not really changing people's behaviors in terms of training. And a lot of that is because, if you're a professional athlete, you're not going to call up your coach. If you're like a player on the All Blacks, you're not going to call your coach and be like, hey, coach, I got a red on my Whoop, so I'm not going to come to practice today. Like that never happens. That does not happen. It's interesting and fun. Like I enjoy it. I think it's fun, but the only real behavior changes I've made out of it, and I think I think the data shows that the behavior changes I've made are what most people are doing, which is, limiting drinking or stopping drinking alcohol, and just making sure that as you plan your sleep, you're in bed for longer than you want to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, unless you are, some kind of genetic freak who can consistently pass out and wake up 8 hours later, those people are. I can do that sometimes. It doesn't happen all the time, so one has to kind of add that buffer.
Yeah,
exactly. For rest.
Exactly. So yeah, and I think for that reason it's fun, and I think if people are curious about tracking, honestly, I think you could get one of these devices and track your sleep for 3 months or something, and you'd really see some trends, and then you're kind of good. Like I like doing it; it's fun, but at this point I don't really learn anything new. I know that when I take a red eye to New York and go directly from the airport to meetings, that I am poorly recovered, that my heart rate variability is going to be low. I'm going to feel poorly. And if I drink alcohol, it's going to make the whole thing even worse. Like I know that.
Yeah.
I don't actually need to be wearing this anymore to know that. And I think also,
Sure.
I do think it's important that we don't substitute these devices for making sure we're listening to our own bodies and having body awareness. Like, I think that's one potential pitfall. Is I do think it's important that we listen to how we feel. Do I actually feel tired? Do I feel foggy? Do I think that we have to make sure that we're not substituting this data, what we're seeing on our app, for how we're feeling, because it might be incorrect. I mean, one example is that, we worked with an athlete, a professional mountain biker, and she woke up on the day of a world championship event with a red on her score. And she said, man, this doesn't seem correct. I feel amazing. I feel great. I feel recovered. I feel awesome. And she had to just ignore the data, and she won a world championship that day. So I think there's some real use to this. I think it's changing people's habits and for the positive. And I also think an over-reliance on it isn't doing us any favors.
Talking of biking, switching gears a bit, one thing that clicked with me right away is some of your applied practices around, again, mobility. One of the things you talked about is the sit and rise test. So I would love for you to talk about that, because I think it's, again, some of those really simple but vital foundations.
So we started our book. Chapter 1 of our book is actually the sit and rise test. And the reason we started our book is this way, is that, as I said earlier, we really want people to give a crap about their mobility, but it's really hard to. And talk about, like, if we did a hierarchy of sexiness in terms of what's cool in health, wellness, fitness, longevity, like mobility is literally at the bottom of that list. Like, it's really hard to make mobility sexy. Nobody wants to do it. We all want to be outside doing the things we love. None of us want to be laying on our living room floor, rolling around on a foam roller. Like, that's just not that fun. Unfortunately, though, mobility is a pretty important part of aging. The number one reason people end up in a nursing home is that they can't get up and down off the ground. One of the reasons that people become frail and lose their independence as they get older is their lack of mobility. And so it is something that we need to keep an eye on. And that's why we started our book with this thing called the sit and rise test. Some people may have heard of it or seen it on Instagram because it is fun. It was based on a 2017 study done by a group of Brazilian and American researchers, and they put 2,000 study participants through this test. And the test is lowering yourself to the ground without using any support, and then standing back up off the ground without using a knee or hand for support. And sometimes when I show or describe this test, like, people laugh out loud because they're like, there's no way that we can do this test. But what the researchers showed is that if you needed more than, and it was scored out of 10, if you needed more than 2 points of contact, meaning you scored below an 8 on the test, you had a 2 to 5 times higher likelihood of dying within the next 6 years. So at a high level, it's a test of your longevity and your morbidity and mortality. And it I think what we hope gives people this really quick insight into their own mobility, their hip mobility in particular. And your hips are sort of your biggest movers and drivers in your body. And so one of the reasons we included this test in the book, and it was sort of our, we had this rule when we included anything in our book, is that it needed to be based on science. It needed to be accessible, i.e., you didn't have to go spend $500 getting a VO2 max test. And it needed to be actionable, meaning you could improve. And over the last year, we've had thousands of people reach out to us and say, when I read your book and watched your videos about the sit and rise test, I laughed out loud. I thought there was no way I could do this. But they've seen that by following a couple of really simple practices, they actually were able to improve on the test and even be able to get up and down without putting a knee or hand on the ground. And I think it shocked people. And the reason that I love this test so much is the way to get better at this test is a few really simple practices, one of which I'm doing right now, which is sitting on the floor. Now, you'll appreciate this because you come from a culture where people sit on the floor and as a matter of course, but in cultures where people sit on the ground, sleep on the ground, use the bathroom on the ground, there is significantly fewer orthopedic problems. There are way fewer hip replacements, way fewer incidences of lower back pain, and just generally folks who sit on the ground a lot have way fewer orthopedic problems. And it turns out sitting on the ground is one of the best ways that we know to get better at the sit and rise test. First of all, in order to sit on the ground, you have to do the test, meaning you need to lower yourself to the ground. And at some point, you need to get back up off the ground. So our recommendation is for people to endeavor to sit on the ground for 30 minutes a day. And the reason that this is so simple to implement into your busy life is that we know the data shows that the average American is watching 3 hours of television a day. And that's, by the way, apart from your smartphone use. That's like watching Netflix or whatever you're doing at night after you get home from work. So we recommend that you add in 30 minutes of floor sitting during that. I mean, more is better. If you're going to watch 3 hours of TV and can do the whole thing sitting on the floor, great. The other great place that you can slot this in if you're not a TV watcher, is many of us are lucky enough to be able to work from home. So, I'm taking this podcast right now sitting on the floor in front of my couch. My laptop is up on the coffee table. And what's great is that, we're talking for an hour, hour and a half, and I'm getting an hour and a half of hip mobility work that's really sort of passive. And the reason that it works so well is that, partly because we've all gotten out of the habit of sitting on the floor, so it's not that comfortable for us in many cases. And so we naturally move positions. We sit crisscross applesauce. We long sit, which is our legs out in front of us. We're constantly changing positions, but that constant change of positions is actually taking our hips through all the ranges of motion that a hip is supposed to be doing. Sitting on the floor engages our core in ways that sitting in a chair doesn't work. There are just so many ways that sitting on the floor sort of help rewild our hips and make our hips do the things that hips are supposed to do. And it helps you be able to get up and down off the ground and do the sit and rise test without support. And it also just is such a quick and easy insight into your mobility. I mean, get up and down off the ground and sit on the floor. It's something that many cultures take for granted. When we're all in elementary school, we sit on the floor all the time. Nobody thinks it's a thing. And now if we go into a big group and we're lecturing and we say, hey, everybody, move these chairs out of the way and sit on the floor, people are groaning and, oh my God, and they're dying sitting on the floor. And that's a skill that we need to reclaim. And a really simple way you can work on your mobility without, foam rolling and doing a bunch of boring stuff. And you can incorporate it into doing things you're already doing, watching TV, working from home.
Juliet, one day I hope to radically refurnish my home and remove all couches.
Yes.
Because, I can get lazy. I can stand and work. I can be on the ground and work. But like end of the day when I'm super tired, that couch, it just seems to like call at me,
It feels so good, doesn't it? Yeah, it feels so good. You're like, you lay in it and you're like, yeah. And it does. It takes a bit of extra motivation to be like, you know what? I'm just going to lower myself to the ground right in front of this couch and I'm going to do it. I'm going to sit on the floor for a little while.
I was just reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. And one of the things
Great
he
book.
talks about is, you have to set up your environment a little bit to be able to promote important or habits that are important to you. And I think there is room for that. And, it's kind of interesting what you talked about Eastern cultures. And it's sad that when I go back home to India or go to other places, urban societies in these ancient cultures, or they seem to be forgetting some of their best practices. And people are sitting on couches and people are eating food that they...
Yeah, fast food. Yeah, well, I got a couple stories on that. The first is that I'm sure your listeners and you have heard of the blue zones.
Yeah.
And, this is the places on Earth where they have the highest number of centenarians. And one of those places is Okinawa, Japan. But it's actually starting to lose its status as a blue zone for exactly the reason that you say, because the younger generations are abandoning some of those practices that their grandparents followed that made them, made so many of them become centenarians. They're abandoning those practices in favor of sitting on the couch and, eating fast food and being sedentary and being on devices all the time. And so it is, it really is, I couldn't agree more with James Clear's philosophy. We've really tried to set up our house to be as movement rich as possible. We call it creating a movement rich environment. We do still have a couch, but we've tried to create, ways in which it feels comfortable enough to sit on the floor while we watch TV, and have places where we can work on the floor and places where we can work standing in our house. And, I just think, but I couldn't agree more. We've got to change our environments because, out there in the world, our greater environment is set up for us to be totally sedentary and not move our bodies the way we're supposed to move our bodies as humans. And unfortunately, technology is not going away, and, being on our phones isn't going away. And so I think we have to really be mindful about making sure that we don't abandon some of those important practices, like sitting on the floor. It's so simple, but it's really impactful.
I wish I could, move my limbs the way my 3-year-old niece is able to, get into and out of pretzel shapes, without absolutely any discomfort. One other thing on the topic of fitness and mobility, besides the sit and rise tests, are there any other markers that, let's say, older adults can look for to kind of get like a little check mark, the same way we go and get our blood work done? Are there other things you can look at and see where we stand in that, that scale you talked about, 1 to 10? What are some other things?
Sure. I think the other one that I'd like to talk about, because most people don't, is balance. And I think balance is like the unsung hero of longevity. And again, it's not sexy. So it's not talked about as much, but it's so critical. One of the stories I tell in Built to Move is about my mom, who has always been lean and has been active her whole life, but didn't really practice her balance. And then pretty early on in her early 60s, she couldn't really comfortably ride a bike anymore. And she realized that because we were all on a vacation and we had this opportunity to like rent some beach cruisers and just do a little bit of biking. And she didn't feel comfortable riding a bike anymore. And I thought, man, I hadn't really thought about that as a key part, and started doing more and more research. And again, balance and mobility are of course tightly connected. But the ability to balance and is such an important part of our aging process. And it's something we have to practice. It really is a use it or lose it scenario. So the test that people can do, and they can look it up on Google, it's called the SOLEC test. SOLEC stands for standing on one leg, eyes closed, SOLEC. And what you do is you stand on one leg, and you can do whatever you want with your other leg. You can have it in front of you, behind you, out to the side, whatever. And you want to close your eyes. So people don't realize that, one of the reasons that older people fall more in the dark is that people don't realize how much our visual stimulus is connected to our balance. And so older people often fall in the dark or in storms because they lose that visual stimulus that they need to be balanced. And the same thing happens during the SOLEC test. So you can look it up on Google, or it's in our book, Built to Move, and you can put yourself through the SOLEC test. But I think it's a really easy, accessible, simple way to assess where you are in terms of your balance. And you can time yourself how long you can balance with your eyes closed. It's funny to watch people do it, because if you have your eyes open, we can all just stand there like statues and we're like, look at me, I'm crushing this balance thing. And then the moment people close their eyes, it's hilarious. If you watch a big group of people do it, all of a sudden people are they're doing windmill arms, and it's actually very difficult. I think a lot of people listening to this would be surprised. They're like, oh no, I could totally do that. Like I definitely, no problem, I could do that. And then the moment you close your eyes, it becomes very difficult to balance. And so that's one just easy, simple test that you can do with no equipment in your house on your own right now after you listen to this podcast. And speaking of setting up a movement-rich environment, we have figured out ways to add little bits of balance practice to our life. We're huge fans, and by the way, not paid. I'm not a paid person of this. There's a product called a Slack block. It's made by a company called Slack Bow, B-O-W. And it's basically a little, the company started off making slack lines, which a lot of outdoors people love and know what they are. But it's a little sort of mimic of a slack line. It's a little piece of wood on top of a foam, and it sort of mimics a slack line. I keep one underneath my standing desk. We have one in our kitchen at our house. And, everybody who comes in the door of our house, like whether it's a kid or an adult, and we're all standing around cooking dinner, like someone's balancing on the slack block. Like it's just sort of there, right? Talk about creating a movement-rich environment. The other way to practice your balance is doing something called the old man balance test, which I love. It's we also have the test in our book, but it's basically putting on your shoe and sock one leg at a time without putting the foot down. So that's a test we have in our book, but that's actually how I put my shoes and socks on every day because again, it's something I'm already doing. I'm going to put my shoes and socks on, so I may as well gamify it and make it a balance practice. I also brush my teeth standing on one leg. I'm brushing my teeth twice a day, hopefully for 2 minutes aside. So I'm getting 4 minutes of one-legged balance practice there. So there's lots of simple ways where you can incorporate balance into your day. And it really can make a big difference in terms of your longevity. And you don't want to be like my mom. You don't want to wake up at 63 years old and be like, oh, crap, I can't ride a beach cruiser on vacation in Mexico because I've sort of lost sight of my balance. So it's a use it or lose it thing. And there's lots of simple ways that you can practice your balance as in your everyday life.
These practices are actually profound. Simple things that can be inculcated on an everyday thing where one doesn't have to go into a yoga class. One can do these things. And this Solic test, I do some balancing work, one of those inflatable ball things. But I keep doing that with my eyes closed. I think I'm going to do that right after this recording just to see how poorly I do. Because I think once you close your eyes, I think it changes the game completely.
It changes everything. It changes the game. Yeah. And you should video yourself because you would have a funny, it'd be a funny video to watch,
I'll do that and I'll tag you. Cool. Okay. So we talked about some important, daily inculcation, foundational things. Let me ask you if you have any insights to share on perhaps maybe more specific interventions that can help reverse or slow down some of these, ravages of aging, stiffness, let's say, maybe even arthritis. Some of these things have plagued people for generations and people seem to accept them. But now there are all these innovations in technology and whatnot, and you guys are like right at forefront of these things. So can you share on like what are some of those things that excite you about being able to help us continue performing for much longer? Any specific things that are coming to the forefront?
Well, I think one of the greatest things that's happened in the recent health, fitness, longevity space is this focus on strength training. I think this is a really important piece of our longevity because, again, I'm really only interested in things where we can, move the needle that are actionable. I think for many years, there was this, what I describe as like a long, slow rot theory of aging. We all subscribe to this idea that's like, well, you start aging and like, no matter what, you're just on this downhill slide and then you die. Right. And I think that theory is starting to be upended by a lot of thinkers in this space, and that there is actually a lot that you can do now to really slow that process. Of course, we are all going to lose some of our muscle mass. Some of these things are inevitable, but they don't need to be as inevitable. People start to lose their muscle mass at age 35, but then there's a big fall off at age 60. And it turns out that if we really incorporate strength training and build this big sort of like, I think of muscle as like an armor, like it's an armor against aging. Having skeletal muscle mass actually increases our survivability against disease. And the way to think about that is like people often don't die of cancer. They die of wasting away from the treatment for cancer or from, right? And so it's like, man, the bigger and stronger you are, you're more likely to be able to take the hits. Like, we're all going to take hits as humans. I think once you get older, you start to really, when you're 25, you can't appreciate that. You feel invincible. Your body's plastic. You can fall and get back up with no problem. But I think we really all start to realize as we age that, we're all going to have loss and disease and stress, and, we're going to be hit with this sort of inevitable challenges of being a human. And so that's why I really am all about building a durable body. And to me, having a durable body is having a strong body. And it's something that's actually actionable. We can actually make a difference. We can not only limit our loss of muscle mass, but we can continue to put on muscle mass as we age. And it's like an armor as we go into old age. It's like my program and the way that I think about my training and my health is like, I'm on like an anti-frailty program. Like, I'm into anti-frailty. And to me, the antithesis of frailty is durability. And a durable body is a strong body with strong skeleton and has muscle mass on it. It's well rested. It's eaten some fruits and vegetables. It's enjoyed food with their community. It's interacting with other humans. That's a durable body. That's going to be a body that can take some hits, come out on the other side, age well, remain independent, stay out of the nursing home kind of body. Like, that's the program for me.
Yeah, Juliet, let me ask maybe one or two specific things. I mean, people talk about strength training. I used to lift weights a lot. I used to be a lot bigger in my 20s. Stopped that because I started focusing more on my sports, and I need to pick up that again. So let's say somebody who is already spending, let's say, an hour or two every day. They could be biking, they could be surfing. What is, you think, the basic need on, let's say, a weekly basis, like amount of time one should spend lifting weights, and maybe 2 or 3 of your favorite exercises that maybe hit all the important muscle groups and, help us make anti-fragile?
Yeah. So I think most people could lift weights 2 or 3 times a week for like 30 minutes to an hour. One of the things that I think, you mentioned it earlier, the ways in which CrossFit was innovative. One of the things that CrossFit did that I think is the most amazing, because it's sort of apart from CrossFit, is it popularized the home gym. And I could not be more of a fan of the home gym. When we first started our CrossFit gym in 2005, like, we had to, like, you couldn't get gym equipment anywhere. I mean, you can go into Walmart now and buy a kettlebell. If everybody had 2 dumbbells, a little bit heavier than they think, and 1 kettlebell in their house, a little bit heavier than they think, there's 1,000 things you can do with those 3 pieces of equipment. That's like a $100 investment in 3 pieces of equipment. And you can do 1,000 things. Like, the kettlebell swing, I think, is one of the greatest movements. Like, if you ask me what specific movement, like, if anyone listening to this went and bought a kettlebell that's like a little heavier than you think. So, like, don't go out and buy a 12-pound kettlebell. Like, if you think you are good at a 24-pound kettlebell, buy a 36-pound kettlebell. And if everybody did 100 kettlebell swings 4 times a week, like, already major change. 100 kettlebell swings. You can leave your kettlebell in your living room. I mean, we have a kettlebell in our living room. Because sometimes we lose sight of our day, and we didn't have time to train, and, we worked all day, and, we're at home at night, and it's like, you can do 10 sets of 10 kettlebell swings, and that counts. That's awesome. You can squat, you can press with 2 dumbbells, you can deadlift. I actually just made a video on my Instagram recently about 30 different moves, weightlifting moves you can do with just those 2 pieces of equipment, a pair of dumbbells and 1 kettlebell. And so I really think, especially for the folks who are more outdoorsy, I get it. Like, it's not a group of people who wants to join a gym and drive there and go and, like, do all these weightlifting moves with gym people. Like, it's not a vibe for those people. I get it. Most, I'm friends with those people. Like, those are my people. But I think, if you've got room to store a surfboard or climbing equipment, you've got room to store a couple dumbbells and a kettlebell, and there's a lot of good work you can do, and you can type in, now there's so much free programming online. You can type in, like, 20-minute kettlebell workout, and All you need is one kettlebell, and it'll give you a little, there's 100 programs you can choose from. You can do some little workouts in your living room or in your garage. So I think to me, that's the place to start for people, because I get it. Like, a lot of people don't relate to gym culture, going to the gym. They're never going to do that, but I think, are starting to appreciate the need to be strong and have muscle mass. We don't need to overcomplicate it. There's a lot of work you can do with a couple simple pieces of equipment.
I have these two adjustable dumbbells, which are almost always in my line of sight. I can actually see them right now.
Yeah.
And they're one of the best investments I've made, which is, I can just go and, fit in like 20 minutes of workout, like almost every day, and not have to commute to a gym, not have to do all of those things. So I think, that's, again, I think it goes back to your core principles of being able to incorporate exercise and movement in our daily life, because if you do that, then we're more likely to keep doing them.
And I think the quick point I'll make there is that, like, I'm like your listeners. Like, I love mountain biking. I love, paddling, being outside, hiking. Like, when I have free time, that's what I want to be doing. I don't want to be doing all this other stuff. Like, and I don't have unlimited time. Like, I'm not retired. Like, when I'm retired, unlimited time, whatever. But right now I work a lot. I'm raising 2 kids. I've got a lot of demands on my time. So when I have free time, I want to play. I want to be outside and I want to play. But at the same time, I can't not know that I need to do these other things. And so I think that's why we've worked so hard to figure out how can we fit these things into the other parts of our life, so that we make sure we preserve that time to play, because that's what we love to do.
Juliet, you've been in the outdoor world and also now in the fitness world. Who are some of your role models in that world? Maybe just 1 or 2 people. And I mean, what inspires you about them?
Oh man. Let's see. I would start by throwing out the name of a nutritionist that I love, because I think nutrition is like a third rail, and there's so much crap information out there that I think for anyone, this is more in the fitness space, but her Instagram is at Optimize Me Nutrition. I think she is one of the most thoughtful and reasonable voices in the nutrition space on the entire internet. And so I highly recommend a follow there. I'm also super inspired by Jimmy Chin. I love Jimmy Chin. We actually know him, decently well, but I've loved to watch the evolution of his career. And I think it is so cool to see what he's done both as an athlete and now in the film world. He's just someone I love to follow, and watching him teach his kids to be badasses is also amazing. So he's such a fun, inspiring follow for me. And then, I think if anybody is, strength curious, but really needs to get more information, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon wrote a great book called Forever Strong. And she, better than anyone, I think, has made the case for why we need to be strong as we age to be able to do the things we love. So I think those are just the 3 people that pop into mind off the top of my head.
We will put links to these books, and I guess these days everybody knows of Jimmy Chin, people far outside the climbing world as well. I have a copy of the Ready State book next to my bedside. And one thing that I think I would like our listeners to go and read the book is this fun story of how you and your husband met. So I was going to ask you to share that story, but I think that, I'm just going to ask our listeners to look that story up, read the book, go to your website, whatnot. Maybe just, 1 or 2 questions before we wind this up. One thing that I remember hearing you saying that, you guys receive, in your role, all kinds of fitness products to try out, right?
Hundreds.
Hundreds. Okay, awesome. Yeah, curious. You already talked about maybe 1 or 2 ones that you find very useful, but how about one product that you've found, the most bizarre?
Oh my goodness.
You get laughs out of that.
There's been so many bizarre things. I don't know. I'm gonna have to pause on that one. Give me a second to think. There's been so many bizarre things over the years. We've gotten every bizarre supplement, lots of weird trackers. The early trackers were very bizarre because now everyone takes for granted that like a Whoop or an Oura Ring's just on your finger. But actually, the early trackers, you actually had to put all these nodes all over your body. You have to wake up and then you'd have to go lay back down and attach all these nodes to your body and collect data that way. So that was bizarre and unrealistic. Nobody was going to do that. We've gotten a bunch of really bizarre mobility tools because obviously we're the mobility people. So, trying to figure out ways to sort of like, massage your adductors and sort of strange parts of your, musculature that's like up in your bits. So we've gotten a lot of weird stuff over the years. And a lot of cool stuff, Like in my talk, I mentioned how much I love saunaing and cold plunging. I worry that people sauna and cold plunge at the expense of the basics. So that's my concern with those two things. I know so many people who are like, I'm healthy because I sauna. And I'm like, oh, well, you do need to eat like some vegetables and sleep. And but I find those things to be great. And, part of it is I'm away from technology. I can sit in the sauna and talk to my friends and my husband and it feels good. And, there's just a lot of reasons why I enjoy those two things a lot. But again, I consider all that stuff like a nice to have, right? Like if I had to strip it all away, it would be sitting on the floor, eating some fruits and vegetables, laying in bed for 8 or 9 hours a night, walking a lot. And, that's kind of it right there. Like those are the things that are like ride or die that I'm always going to be doing.
Sure. And maybe swing that kettlebell around whenever you're, not in a call or taking your kid out. That again goes back to that great analogy. Do all the things that help us stay fit at
make sure you're at base camp. Get to base camp or get back to base camp. That's the goal.
Awesome. One final question. It seems that this sort of fitness industry in some ways is very saturated, right? And I think of that, but then I come across entrepreneurs like yourself, who are again, doing amazing work in distilling down to the important things and bringing this down. So do you think there are still opportunities for people in this space to innovate on and really, again, deliver on this core mission that you have, which I also strongly believe in, is that we need the everyday person to just become healthier?
Yeah. So I really think we do need those people that are pushing the margins. And those are the people, the researchers and the biohackers in the world. I mean, I think some of those people do some really dumb stuff. But I also think out of their experimentation and trying to sort of push the needle, there has been a lot of innovation and will continue to be a lot of innovation that I think will make a big impact in the longevity space. And so I think those voices and those people and those innovations, and there's a lot happening with technology that I think is going to continue to improve the human condition, because I think that's ultimately what our goal is universally, right? We have to remember that our goal is to improve the human condition. And I think that a lot of people have, they have the right mission and purpose there. And there's a lot, and we need those people. We need those thinkers. We need those people who are pushing the envelope, trying new things, sharing their data. I think there's so much more innovation that can be done. And I just want to make sure that innovation doesn't happen at the expense of the basics for people. So I think we have both, and like I said, I take creatine every day and magnesium before I go to sleep, and I love my sauna and cold plunge. And, there's a lot of things I'm doing for my health that are above and beyond the basics. And, as I learn what new and innovative things are coming down the pipeline, of course, I'll experiment with all those things and implement what I think is useful and valuable, and cast away what I think is not. So I think it's important. I think we need both things. We need the innovators. We need the people who are pushing the envelope, the biohackers, the researchers. We need all those people. Like Brian Johnson is a great example, right? I'm sure. Do you know who Brian Johnson is?
I actually do not.
Brian Johnson is a great, interesting follow. He's a tech guy who made a ton of money in tech. And he's now made himself a giant human longevity experiment. He's spending all his money on himself, working with Stanford physicians, and he spends 24 hours of his day. Like, his life is really weird, by the way. Like, he can't really have relationships, and he eats weird food, and he takes like 700 supplements a day, and he gets his biomarkers being constantly tested. I mean, it's great, like fun fun, weird follow on Instagram, by the way, Brian Johnson. Super, you can go down a rabbit hole. He's a weird dude. But what's interesting is, he's spending all his own money, doing all this own experimentation on his own body, and he's sharing all that data for free in the world. And who knows what interesting things will come out of it that might eventually improve the human condition. So my point is, we need people like that. We need thinkers like that. We need innovators like that. And then we also need people like me out there that are reminding people that the basics will get you, let's say, 90% of the way to good health and 90% of the way to becoming a centenarian. And those folks are all working in the 10%, and we need those people too.
Yeah. And, you can aspire to that 10% if you have the 90% well covered.
Dialed. It's just like the All Blacks. You got to do the basics really well, and then you can start playing in that 10% game.
Juliet, you have a great podcast with some great episodes that I know I'm going to go listen to, and I encourage people to as well. We will link to the podcast, and you have a great website, with all kinds of mobility programs for the everyday person. We will link to that as well. Any other places people can go? Also your Instagram.
Yeah,
they can learn more about what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm at Juliet Starrett on Instagram. Our company's at the Ready State. Our book is called Built to Move. So if you're curious about Built to Move, you can go to builttomove.com. And we actually have a free 21-day challenge. It's always there. If you want to try some of the tests, like the sit and rise test or the Solic test, we guide you through doing that and help you try to figure out how to implement it into your daily life. So builttomove.com, and you can get a bunch of free stuff there.
Beautiful. Some great resources that people will benefit from. We will link to all of those. It's been a delightful conversation.
Wow. It's been fun and so inspiring to hear about Juliet's journey from being a professional athlete and lawyer to an entrepreneur and an advocate for everyday movement. I hope her emphasis on the base camp philosophy has shifted your perspective. Do not go to Everest and do not get stuck in Kathmandu. All of us need to be at base camp. Remember, it's not about chasing the latest trends or miracle solutions. It's about building a foundation of essential habits, boring stuff that's not sexy, but that's stuff also vital. Sleep, strength training, mobility, and mindful movement, and applying them with radical consistency. As Juliet reminds us, these simple practices are surprisingly powerful and can make a profound impact on our health and longevity. I know you will be coming up with a few key takeaways from this chat. So let's recap some of the surprising insights that Juliet shared. Sleep is a must-have. It's not a nice to have. Then strength training is so key for aging athletes. I mean, don't just focus on cardio. And this is just a message that gets repeated with all the athletes. I mean, like 100% of people I speak with, people you have listened to on the show. Next, don't underestimate the power of sitting on the floor. Yes, sitting is the new standing. Sitting on the floor is surprisingly effective to improve our hip mobility and get better at the sit and rise test. I mean, I'm sure you guys, I hope you guys were trying that test yourself as you were listening to the podcast. And then finally, balance is the unsung hero of longevity. Yeah, I mean, it's not just about avoiding falls. It's about maintaining your independence and overall quality of life. So make sure to incorporate regular balance exercises. If you are ready to prioritize your health and unlock your potential for long, active, and vibrant life, be sure to check out Juliet's website, thereadystate.com. You can find a wealth of resources, including her book, Built to Move, her podcast, which dives deeper into these topics, and also a 25-day free program to use some of her resources. Don't forget to give the show a rating on Spotify or Apple. Really, please do that.
This helps with SEO and allows us to reach more listeners. Until next time, my friends, I hope you're inspired to move better, age well, and embrace the adventure of life. Stay ageless out there.
Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through prior episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.